Date and authorship of the Laozi. The date of composition refers to the time when the Laozi reached more or less its final form. It does not rule out later interpolations or corruptions. The traditional view, of course, is that the Laozi was written by Lao Dan in the 6th or early 5th century B.C.E. This seems unlikely, however, if it is assumed that the Laozi was written by a single author. As the archaeological evidence to be presented below will indicate, bodies of sayings attributed to Laozi were committed to writing probably from the second half of the 5th century B.C.E., resulting in different collections with overlapping contents. These collections grew, competed for attention, and gradually came to be consolidated during the 4th century B.C.E. By the middle of the 3rd century B.C.E., the Laozi probably reached a relatively stable form. It is possible, as A.C. Graham suggests, that the Laozi was ascribed to Lao Dan around 250 B.C.E. by the text's author or publicizer capitalizing on Lao Dan's reputation. 1986, 119, also see Graham 1989. It is also possible that the Laozi has preserved the ideas of Lao Dan. D.T. Chan, for example, believes that the text embodied the teachings of Laozi, although it was not written until the 4th century 1963-74. It seems reasonable to suppose that Laozi, whether or not his real name was Li'er, attracted a following, and that some of his sayings entered the world of Chinese philosophical discourse during the 5th century B.C.E. A process of oral transmission may have preceded the appearance of these sayings in written form. It is conceivable that a succession of editors or compilers brought together diverse bodies of Laozi sayings, resulting in the mature Laozi. D.C. Lau, for example, is of the view that the Laozi is an anthology 1963-14. According to Bruce Brooks and Taeko Brooks, the Laozi contains different layers of material spanning the period between 340 and 249 B.C.E. Its long time span precludes a single author. 1998, 151. Indeed, Chad Hansen describes the dominant current textual theory of the Dao De Jing as one which treats the text as an edited accumulation of fragments and bits drawn from a wide variety of sources. There was no single author, no Laozi 1992-201. Although in this sense the Laozi may be regarded as a composite work, the product of many hands over a long period of time, it should not be assumed that the sayings that now inhabit the Laozi were put together at random. More likely, the final product reflects a process of intellectual distillation on the part of the compilers who arranged and/or altered the material at their disposal. See also Lafargue 1992 and Mayer 1990 on the composition of the Laozi. The language of the Laozi does provide some clues to its date of composition. Much of the text is rhymed. Focusing on rhyme patterns, Liu Shaogan, 1994 and 1997, concludes that the poetic structure of the Laozi is closer to that of the Shijing classic of poetry than that of the later Chuxi songs of Chu. The dating of the Shijing and the Chuxi is by no means precise, although generally the poems collected in the former should not be later than the early 5th century B.C.E., whereas those collected in the latter can be traced to no earlier than the middle of the Warring States period, around 300 B.C.E. For this reason, Liu Shaogan argues, the traditional view first articulated by Sima Qian should be upheld. Examining a wider range of linguistic evidence, William Baxter agrees that the Laozi should be dated earlier than the Zhuangzi and the Chuxi, but he traces the bulk of the Lao Chu to the mid or early 4th century 1998-249. Both Liu and Baxter provide a concise analysis of the different theories of the date of the Laozi. Why is all this important? It may be argued that date and authorship are immaterial, too, and may detract from interpretation. The truth of the Laozi is timeless according to this view, transcending historical and cultural specificities. Issues of provenance are important, however, if context has any role to play in the production of meaning. Polemics among different schools of thought, for example, were far more pronounced during the Warring States period than in the earlier spring and autumn period 770481 BCE. There are different ways to date the spring and autumn and warring states periods, but they do not affect the discussion here. The Zhou government had been in decline. Warfare among the feudal states intensified both in scale and frequency from the 4th century BCE onward. As the political conditions deteriorated, philosophers and strategists, who grew both in number and popularity as a social group or profession during this time, vied to convince the rulers of the various states of their program to bring order to the land. At the same time, perhaps with the increased displacement and disillusionment of the privileged elite, a stronger Eremitic tradition also emerged. If the bulk of the Laozi had originated from the 4th century, it might reflect some of these concerns. From this perspective, the origin of the Laozi is as much a hermeneutical issue as it is a historical one. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism generally named the three main currents of Chinese thought, although it should be obvious that, like any ism, they are abstractions. What they name are not monolithic but multifaceted traditions with fuzzy boundaries. In the case of Taoism, it designates both a philosophical tradition and an organized religion, which in modern Chinese are identified separately as Daojia and Daojiao, respectively. With their own rich histories and internal differences, the two are deeply intertwined. Laozi, or Lao Tzu, in the Wei-Giles system of transliteration favored by earlier generations of Western scholars, figures centrally in both. Philosophical Taoism traces its origins to Laozi, an extraordinary thinker who flourished during the 6th century BCE, according to Chinese sources. According to some modern scholars, however, Laozi is entirely legendary. There was never a historical Laozi. In religious Taoism, Laozi is revered as a supreme deity. The name Laozi is best taken to mean Old Lao Master Zi. And Laozi, the ancient philosopher, is said to have written a short book, which has come to be called simply the Laozi, after its putative author, a common practice in early China. When the Laozi was recognized as a classic Jing, that is, accorded canonical status in the classification of Chinese literature, on account of its profound insight and significance, it acquired a more exalted and hermeneutically instructive title, Dao Dejing Tao Ti Ching, commonly translated as the classic of the way and virtue. Its influence on Chinese culture is pervasive, and it reaches beyond China. It is concerned with the Tao or way and how it finds expression in virtue day, especially through what the text calls naturalness ziren and non-action wu wei. These concepts, however, are open to interpretation. While some interpreters see them as evidence that the Laozi is a deeply spiritual work, others emphasize their contribution to ethics and/or political philosophy. Interpreting the Laozi demands careful hermeneutic reconstruction, which requires both analytic rigor and an informed historical imagination. The Shiji records of the historian by the Han Dynasty 206 B.C.-220 CE, E-Court scribe and historian Sima Qiankai. 14586 B.C.E. offers a biography of Laozi. Its reliability has been questioned, but it provides a point of departure for reconstructing the Laozi story. Laozi was a native of Chu, according to the Shiji, a southern state in the Zhou dynasty. See map and discussion in Lowy and Shaughnessy, 1999, 594 and 597. His surname was Li, his given name was Ir, and he was also called Dan. Laozi served as a keeper of archival records at the court of Zhou. Confucius 551479 BC. He had consulted him on certain ritual matters, we are told, and praised him lavishly afterward. Shiji 63. This establishes the traditional claim that Laozi was a senior contemporary of Confucius. A meeting or meetings between Confucius and Laozi, identified as Lao Dan, is reported also in the Zhuangzi and other early Chinese sources. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us create better content for you. See you in the next video.